Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking the Government of India Act of 1935. And look, we aren't just going to read through this as some piece of dry, dusty law. We're going to explore it as a massive, incredibly intricate architectural blueprint. A blueprint specifically designed to structure a wildly fragmented subcontinent. Honestly, if you really want to understand the constitutional DNA of modern South Asia, you absolutely have to understand this document.
Okay, before we look at the solution, let's visualize the problem the British were actually trying to solve here. Pre-partition India was, well, it was a highly complex patchwork. You see the areas in yellow. Those are the British Indian provinces, tightly under the strict control of the central government. But then you've got those areas in blue. Those are the princely states. They weren't under direct administrative control in the same way. The crown had varying degrees of control over them, sure, but they kept a ton of internal autonomy. So the big question was, how on earth do you unify these two incredibly different types of territories? To understand how they tried to pull this off, we'll navigate through these 6 crucial sections of their proposed federal framework today: a patchwork subcontinent, the political chessboard, designing the federation, the division of powers, the judicial hierarchy, and finally, the home government. Let's jump right into Section 1, a patchwork subcontinent and the need for a federal blueprint. The 1935 Act proposed a federation basically because, logistically speaking, it was the only way to bridge these vastly different units. On one hand, you've got the provinces, completely micromanaged by the center. On the other hand, the princely states. And getting these states to voluntarily join a new federation, incredibly difficult. They were super hesitant to sign up for any system that might threaten their existing internal autonomy. So, a federal system was pitched as this bridge, a compromise between absolute central control and regional independence.
All right, moving on to Section 2, the political chessboard. We're looking at the competing agendas for India's future here. Building a single house for 1 billion different opinions is, pretty much impossible. This table brilliantly illustrates the conflicting demands placed on this blueprint. Looking neutrally at the historical record, here's what each major stakeholder actually wanted. The Indian National Congress? They outright opposed the federation as it was proposed. The Muslim League supported a loose federation with a weak center. The princely states favored a non-intrusive federation. They wanted federal power kept strictly limited. And then there's the British trying to play referee. They wanted to pacify these competing aspirations while, of course, making sure the federation ultimately served their own imperial interests. It's a real balancing act. So how did they actually build it? Let's dive into Section 3, Designing the Federation, the structural core of the 1935 Act. The executive branch at the federal level ran on this really fascinating concept called diarchy. Basically, it's a split system. The Governor-General of India, or GGI, held the executive power of the king. That meant the GGI kept massive, unchallengeable control over the heavy-hitting stuff, raising defense forces, managing foreign affairs, overseeing tribal areas. But for the administration of other everyday federal subjects, the GGI was supposed to act alongside a council of ministers, a very calculated split of authority. Let's take a look at the federal legislature. The numbers were highly specific. The upper house, the Council of State, gets 156 members from British India and 104 from the states. The lower house, the House of Assembly, gets 250 from British India and 125 from the states. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. This central legislature was incredibly rigid. Even with elected bodies, lawmakers couldn't even discuss foreign affairs, tribal areas, or the conduct of judges without getting explicit permission from the Governor-General first. Even money bills needed the GGI's okay. Plus, the GGI had extensive ordinance-making power. So, yeah, a very tight leash. Now, moving down to the provincial level, the architecture was kind of all over the place. 6 provinces, Madras, Bombay, Bengal, the United Provinces, Bihar, and Assam, got a bicameral or 2-house legislature. Meanwhile, 5 others, like Punjab and Sindh, just operated with a unicameral, single-house system. It's also really important to note that these elections were based on the Communal Award of 1932. And much like the center, provincial governors had special powers that seriously limited what the legislature could actually do. Which brings us to Section 4, the division of powers. Let's look at the operating rules meant to keep this massive machine from completely breaking down. To prevent chaos, the Act explicitly divided legislative powers into 3 distinct lists. First up, the federal list. This one had 59 entries, and it fiercely guarded the macro-level imperial interests. Think national infrastructure. The center had totally exclusive power over the naval, military, and air forces, external affairs, currency, public debt, and the vital railway network.
Conversely, you had the provincial list, with its 54 entries. This was all about the day-to-day running of society. It basically handed local leaders the keys to the car for domestic administration, things like public order, the police, land, local government, and education. It let the provinces handle their own backyards, while keeping the big-picture military and financial powers safely locked up at the federal level. And finally, we have the concurrence list with 36 entries. This is where you really see the delicate balancing act of the 1935 Act. These were areas where both the federal and provincial legislatures could technically make rules. It covered vital, shared stuff like criminal and civil procedure, marriage and divorce, contracts, and factory regulations. It was essentially a shared sandbox. But naturally, this brings up a massive structural question. With all these overlapping lists, semi-autonomous provinces, and a wildly powerful central executive, who actually enforces this complex blueprint? When disputes inevitably break out, and they will, who acts as the referee? To maintain order and stop the federation from just collapsing under its own weight, the Act set up a formidable judicial architecture. These pillars right here represent a system built specifically to interpret the rules and resolve all that friction between the center and the provinces. Let's map that out in Section 5, the judicial hierarchy. Time to meet the referees. The flow of appeals was meticulously layered. Starting way down at the ground level, you had your district courts and subordinate courts. From there, you could appeal up to regional high courts. Above them sat the brand new federal court. And ultimately, sitting at the absolute top of the pyramid, above everything in India, was the Privy Council. Let's zoom in on that federal court for a second. It was highly specialized and tiny, just one Chief Justice and 6 judges. Every single one of them was directly appointed by the Crown, and they retired at 65. They had exclusive jurisdiction over federal issues, mostly making declarative rulings, and appealing from a high court to the federal court, not easy at all. You needed a specific certificate proving your case involved a substantial question of law, or you had to get a special leave petition greenlit by the Governor General. But here's the kicker. The ultimate legal authority wasn't even located in India. Nope, it was the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council over in London. They handled the top-level appeals coming from the federal court. On top of that, the Privy Council could issue advisory rulings directly if the Governor General asked for them, firmly cementing London's final say over Indian legal disputes. And that leads us perfectly into our final section, the home government. Let's talk about the ultimate control of this entire system. Because despite this very real, very complex illusion of devolved local power in the provinces, the ultimate strings were always pulled from London. The oversight structure was anchored by the Secretary of State for India and Council, backed up by 3 to 6 advisors working right alongside the British cabinet. Crucially, only the Imperial Parliament back in the UK held the power for constitutional amendment. The size of the legislatures, the voter rules, the whole shebang. It could only be changed by the original architects. And just to make absolutely sure those imperial interests were never actually threatened on the ground, look at how executive representation was handled. Sure, a High Commissioner for India acted as the face on the international stage, but the actual engine of power, that incredibly powerful Governor General we talked about, handpicked directly by the British Prime Minister. The very center of the Indian executive was a British appointee wielding the executive power of the king.